Action.
Action it is. This is the Midrash for Torah portion Beshalach. Before we get started on that, though, if you join for praying after we eat, the scripture says you'll eat and be satisfied, and you'll bless Adonai your God for the good land he has given you. So let's do that. Abba, we've eaten and we're satisfied. We thank you for the land. In Yeshua's name we thank you. Amen. All right, well, this was our Aliyot. The first verse. See the word paro is the third word in there. It's where obviously the English word Pharaoh comes from. He is the one that's sending out. It happened when Pharaoh sinned, so it's Pharaoh who's doing the sending.
What was his name? Pharaoh just a title.
Pharaoh is a title.
Do we know what his name was?
Well, there's different views of it. Some would say that it's Ramses because of this mentioning of the city of Ramses. I don't know if the time actually window fits that. There's various views given on that. I just don't recall for sure what the name of the pharaoh was. The Egyptian chronology is not. It's a little bit wonky as well, and so the view of what the years of the pharaohs in the Egyptian chronology, it's questionable as well. If you remember from watching the Exodus videos, the Exodus timeline kind of things, it wasn't Ramesses in that one. I don't recall the one he settled on for that. It shouldn't be hard to look up. I can pull that. No, I think I should know, but I don't recall.
Yeah, I can't remember. I remember that series we watched.
Mm-hmm.
You adjust the timeline by a certain amount of years in one direction.
It actually fits it.
Things line up a lot better.
Yeah, because you got the known points where there is some an event that associated with the Exodus. Of course, is destruction. With blowing the shofar with Joshua, and that is the timeline that doesn't line up. If you don't look at the archaeology for Jericho and just look at the Egyptian chronology, you end up a couple hundred years off. And so that's why the modern Egyptologists that follow the Egyptian chronology would say, well, there's no evidence for the Exodus because we're looking at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But if you the archaeology for the relatively modern archaeology from the 1950s that was done on Jericho puts it really right at the time period that would line up with a later Exodus around 1600 BCE would be about the time for that. There's additional view of 1406 is given as one other time for the Exodus, and like 1230, 1250 for the other one. The 1230, 1250 time period or so would put it where Ramesses would be the pharaoh, and that's why that time is picked because of the time of the Egyptian chronology for Ramses. But that time doesn't line up with the destruction of Jericho, so it needs to be amended.
Maybe it was Hyksos leader?
Well, I think not. I think it was probably after that because I would say that Hyksos were perhaps friends with Joseph because they were of a Semitic background.
Yes. Right. Asking Yaakov to bless him. That would never happen.
Yeah, right. And so the Pharaoh arose who didn't know Joseph would be a replacement for the Hyksos dynasty, I guess, I think. Right. Oh, okay. Sorry, this is the kind of the question of how many mitzvot. I didn't ask a question.
I think it's one.
It's one, and this is the mitzvah to stay in your place. Yeah, and we're going to talk about what that could mean, how that's been interpreted as what does it mean to stay in your place. And I think that I want to say that Jim was reading this, and in his version read "stay in your house." I want to say that's what it said, if I remember correctly. But if you see, it's 1629. If you look on the bottom, the bottom line of the Hebrew text, and count in 1, 2, 3, and 4, the fourth word, the middle word kind of that set, is from the word makom, which means place, which doesn't necessarily mean home.
It's where you are at the time.
Yeah, and it's place can be more broad than your home. But you can say my home is in a city. You can say my home is in, Lakeside, California, but that would be not necessarily the home is normally meant to be, a dwelling, a single dwelling. But so telling you to stay inside your house, not leave your house.
Yeah. Beit or Hill isn't in the sentence, right?
No. So the context of the command to stay in your place is here in verse 9. He's given you bread for 2 days. Let man remain in his place, and let no man leave his place on the seventh day. So the purpose of this is so you're not doing something outside your place. And what is that? Working by gathering food or looking for manna. So it's kind of a stay in your place and don't go out to work in that sense. So it's really still about the not working, going out to find bread find your manna outside the camp, because all would be having to leave the camp to go search the ground to get the manna, and that would be leaving their symbolic, not just symbolic, but really leaving their place to go find that. So they're not to go out to gather in the manna. What is it? So this is Rashi's comment on the distance. To no man leave your place. Rashi's comment it's based on Tractate Sotah in the Talmud Bavli, which is discussing Numbers 5, 11-31. It says these are the 2,000 cubits of the Sabbath limits, but this is not explicit, for the laws of Sabbath limits are only rabbinic enactments, literally the words of the scribes. And the essence of the verse was stated regarding those who gathered the manna. So the Sabbath limit of 2,000 cubits is, according to Rashi, is a rabbinic enactment only. But what that would equate to, 2,000 cubits is about 0.57 miles. So do not walk 2,000 cubits outside of your eruv. That is again, if the Sabbath enactment is 2,000, and eruv is also a rabbinic enactment, it is an eruv is would be in ancient times would be like the wall of your walled city. Scottsdale, Arizona, for example, does have an eruv, but it's not a walled city. But they placed a wire around it, which allows you understand in the reason for an eruv as an enclosure, because inside an eruv is like inside your place, which allows particularly carrying to be allowed, because within rabbinic Judaism, you're not allowed to carry money. You can't carry items larger than the size of a walnut that include your baby. You're not allowed to carry your baby outside on Shabbat, but you could carry your baby if you're inside an eruv. the 2,000 cubits was what the Pharisees enacted. It was half that in the Essene community at Qumran. They set the distance. They also set the distance of what it meant. They basically interpreted it to mean 1,000 cubits. So about, roughly a quarter mile, not the 0.57 miles for the Pharisees, but roughly 0.26 or so miles, 0.27 miles. Here's a picture of that eruv, and the red line on the map shows where the wire goes, and there's a photo of the wire at inside the wire of the eruv. So that eruv is a wire that goes 40 miles roughly around this city.
Yeah.
So it would be fine to walk from the bottom left to the top right, carrying your baby, but you couldn't carry your baby more than 2,000 cubits outside the walls in the rabbinic understanding.
They have that today?
Yeah.
Yes.
How do they do that with highways and things like that? Would they go underground under a highway, or
No, these are all above ground.
would it be like a high as a telephone wire then?
It would be like on. You can see the pole there. It's looks kind of like a telephone wire to me, but it's not quite. It's a thin wire, but it's on a pole. I would think that could be definitely be marked for any kind of air traffic as well. But it's higher than. Can't reach it. You can't reach up and touch it.
Yeah, there was one in San Antonio too.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
When William and I were at the polytrauma hospital, there was a guy who kept coming in. He was Jewish, and he and I would talk, and he knew full well we were Messianic, but he still he was in whatever the San Antonio hierarchy of Jews is, the little councils. He held a pretty prominent position, and he still wrote a letter for William and I, making us members of one of the down there.
Nice.
I'll think of the name. We only went a couple times, but he told us there wasn't a room there, so don't worry. He said, "Don't worry about driving, just come."
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
There's a huge, where we were, real close by where we were. There's a huge, I'm telling you, 100-acre Jewish cemetery right there in San Antonio.
Oh.
Several synagogues too. One Messianic synagogue, but I'll talk about it later.
Right. So about the driving on Shabbat, of course, Orthodox Judaism does not allow driving because it holds it to be violating the command against carrying.
Yeah, I didn't mean a Jewish guy driving. There's also non-Jews living in the city. They got to drive, and if that wire they'd have to be able to drive under the wire or something.
No, the wire is above the.
Yeah.
Is above. They're not.
Okay, I didn't know
Power
how
line height.
Yeah, it's
power line high.
right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. See, I
Is
was
it-
picturing just something
oh.
like a fence.
Well, that make it impossible to drive on non-Shabbat too. If it's you have to be decapitated by going through a. Yeah, but yeah, it's probably not even noticeable in this part. I mean, if you know it's there, you know it's there, and so you would be able to use it if you were Jewish and wanted to keep that.
Time to see it. I don't even know what it looks like. But for the record, lots of places they don't drive. Especially if you live close by your synagogue or your shul, that
Mm-hmm.
you'll walk to synagogue, but people drive. I'm telling you, people drive.
Well, within conservative and non-Orthodox, Reform and other denominations will allow to drive, while really Orthodox only would not allow driving on Shabbat. So this is the idea of a Sabbath day journey also appears in the apostolic scriptures. Acts 1:12 says, "Then they returned to Jerusalem from Mount called Olivet, or Mount of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away." And so the distance from the old city wall to Mount of Olives is approximately 1 kilometer or 0.62 miles, so pretty close to the 2,000 cubits in that sense. There's a photograph looking across the Kidron Valley up to the Mount of Olives. So from this photo, right behind the photographer is the old city wall. So what should our halakha be on this? Well, we learned from Rashi that 2,000 cubits on leaving your place was a rabbinic enactment, and that the real command was not to go out of your place nor to gather manna on Shabbat. However, a very similar distance to the 2,000 cubits was acknowledged by early believers in Yeshua. So we've talked about this before, but in Hosea 6:6, Yeshua quoted from it. The text says, "For I delight in chesed rather than sacrifice, in knowledge," Hebrew word da'at, "of Elohim rather than burnt offerings." We can learn from this is that not every command has the specific weight or the same weight. For example, we know that circumcision is of a greater weight than resting on Shabbat, because you're to circumcise your son on the 8th day, whether it's Shabbat or not. So we also know that there's a difference in ancient times about what different forms of Judaism would do on Shabbat or allow on Shabbat. I mean, we've known for many years that the tradition of the Qumran community was stricter than the Pharisees. The Pharisees believed that life was an overarching command, and that you would save a life, even an animal, on Shabbat. Whereas the Qumran community believed that Shabbat was of the greater weight, and they would not throw a rope to a drowning man on Shabbat. The reason that he should not have been out doing whatever he was doing. And so the animal should not have been under a load. Animals should not have been involved in something that would cause it to be hurt. So I think that we can clearly see that Yeshua's view aligned in this case much more with Hosea 6:6, chesed rather than sacrifice. As chesed and the knowledge of Elohim are greater than burnt offering, so greater than the temple service, and temple service is of greater weight than Shabbat, because the priests and Levites all work in the temple on Shabbat and don't rest, but they work because it's their duty to do so. So continuing, while sacrifice and burnt offerings are commands, chesed and the knowledge of Elohim are of a greater weight, according to what we read here in Hosea 6:6. Now we've also read, we've talked about it before, that even it was permitted on the 1st and the 7th months for a rider to ride on horseback, which would be considered work, in order to bring a testimony of the sighting of the new moon to the Sanhedrin to make a determination as to the beginning of the month. But there's only the specific times where it was important to keep the right day. And so it wasn't every month, every new moon, but only in the 1st and the 7th months, where you'd have, of course, Pesach and unleavened bread in the 1st month, and the fall holiday in the 7th month. That was allowed. And so again, Shabbat is of a lesser weight than determining the month for the biblical holiday. So the rabbinic interpretation and understanding not to carry the vessels, carry the loads, based on not carrying loads through Jerusalem's gates on Shabbat. But what were they doing by carrying loads through Jerusalem's gates? What was the purpose of carrying those loads through Jerusalem's gates? Buying and selling. So they're carrying the loads of stuff to sell it on Shabbat. And so that's the start for that do not carry command within traditional Judaism. And the 2,000 cubit limit is, again, about not carrying goods through the gates to sell on Shabbat as well. That's kind of what we see. The context of that is from Nehemiah 13, which talks about not buying or selling on Shabbat. So if chesed and knowledge of Elohim are of greater weight than sacrifice, and sacrifice for priests is a greater weight than resting on Shabbat, it means that chesed and knowledge of Elohim are of a greater weight than 2,000 cubit Sabbath limit. So in that view, driving your car on a Shabbat is permitted in the pursuit of the knowledge of Elohim. And so in this case, I would say that conservative Judaism seems to understand the greater weight concept better than Orthodox Judaism, because they will allow you to drive on Shabbat to get to your synagogue. When Pharaoh sent the people out. So if you look at the idea here from 13:17, we've talked about it before, but here's how JPCT translates Judaica Press Complete Tanakh: when Pharaoh let the people go. But as we've talked about, this is really when Pharaoh sent the people out, not let the people go. He made them leave. He didn't say, you can go if you want to. He said, y'all get out. And so we kind of talked about it a little bit in the preamble, so to speak. We're talking about in the readings and such about the why it was a question in the fun challenge about the way of the Philistines, and this has the Targum. Jonathan has more detail about it, and the Targum says, and it was when Pharaoh had released the people or sent the people out. And the Targum Jonathan has 3 yuds as the euphemism for Yah. It says when Yah released people, did not conduct them by the way of the land of the Philistines. It was the near one. For Yah said, lest people be frightened and sing their brethren who were killed in war, 200,000 men of strength of the tribe of Ephraim, who took shields and lances and weapons of war, and went down to Gath to carry off the flocks of the Philistines, because they transgressed against the statute of the word of Yah, and went north from Mitzrayim 3 years before the appointed time of their servitude. They were delivered into the hand of the Philistines, who killed them. These are and then it goes on to make a drash about the dry bones of Ezekiel. I would not necessarily connect those two together, but the Targum says these are the dry bones that be restored by the ministry of the hand of Ezekiel, prophet, in the valley of Dura, but which if they now saw them, they would be afraid, return to Mitzrayim. So I don't know. This is from the Targum and was read along the Torah, or this is the Targum of the prophets. So Jonathan is that one. So it's the one that's really along the side of the prophets versus the Torah that says this. But it is a strong Jewish tradition that the reason they went the alternate route because of Ephraim going before you being killed in advance. So 200,000 men would be a lot, right? Considering that it was only 600 something thousand men that left Egypt with Moses. 3 years earlier than that, 200,000 men. That's probably a lot. So I would say that it'd be far less than that, but it could certainly be the same thing about. It says that because of finding out war, the cost of war, that people would be afraid to go. So it's certainly plausible that the dry bones that they would see, in the desert would be from the tribe of Ephraim that had been killed by the Philistines, because there was a time, just as there's lots of things in life that are a time to do things and time not to do things. There's a time to leave Egypt, and this wasn't the time. We'll talk about it a little bit when we get to the bread, right? The manna, because manna is another example of that, isn't it? Because manna, you're supposed to, for Shabbat, you're supposed to, on Friday, Erev Shabbat, you're supposed to bake the bread, make the manna into bread and keep it but only on Shabbat. Otherwise, you're not supposed to do that. It'll turn to worms or be worm-ridden and smelly, as it says. So Yam Suf, or some translations read the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea. God led the people by a roundabout route through the desert by the Sea of Suf, or Yam Suf. Israel went up from the land of Egypt fully armed, which I think the text says by fives, which is interpreted to mean, yeah. So looking at, when you see that similar phrases for Suf, what's the meaning of Suf? Some have said, well, it's an Egyptian phrase meaning Sea of Reeds, but we see variants of that word several times in the Hebrew text of the scriptures, and it is translated in English as end, conclusion, cease, swept away, snatch up, or remove. So it seems that could be a good idea of Yam Suf as being the sea of Pharaoh's armies being swept away or ceasing. Yeah. And Yah went up with them by day in a column of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a column of fire to give light, so as to be by day and by night. The column did not cease by day, nor the column of fire by night before the people. So, according to the Zohar, the pillar of cloud was Chesed, and the pillar of fire was Gevurah. So that Israel was illuminated by day and night. So Chesed and Gevurah, you can say that Chesed is mercy, Gevurah is its strength, be a way of looking at that. It would be more in terms of judgment in that sense versus Chesed. Rashi talks about the turning back toward the rear, and a couple of place names we'll see in the reading of the text. Pi Hacharot is mouth of freedom. It should say Baal Zephon is Baal of the north. Pitom is what Rashi says Pi Hacharot is. It's the place in Israel called Bnei Horin that is two high upright rocks, because the valley between them is called the mouth of the rocks, mouth of freedom. And Baal Zephon is a deity, the Lord of the North. This sort of says it's an Egyptian deity. I think it's probably more likely to be Canaanite than Egyptian deity. So anything about where our reading says that Egyptians or Mitzrayim was marching. So looking at the text, it's Mitzrayim Nosea. Nosea is marched, but the tense isn't plural like Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is a plural word that should have taken a plural, the verb of marching. So one of the things that the commentary, Exodus Rabbah, says is that Mitzrayim is the guardian angel of Egypt, and he was marching after them. That would explain the tense of Nosea as not being plural, or not the tense, but the formulation of the word as being singular and not plural. You can also look at it perhaps as Mitzrayim was marching as one after them, as being led by one Pharaoh, and not the Egyptians were marching, but Egypt as a whole was marching. The text tells us that Moses said to people, "Don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation," or the salvation of Yud-He Vav-He. And you notice that it's the word for salvation in this text is Yeshuat, salvation of. It's in the construct form. It's a construct form that would certainly be where the name Yeshua is derived from, salvation. So Yeshua is the salvation of Yah. This is a time, again, there's some times where there is time for to pray at length. And there's a time when Yah says, stop talking and move out. Rabbi Eliezer said, "The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, there's a time to pray briefly and time to pray at length. My children are in dire distress. The sea shuts them in and the enemy is pursuing. And you stand here and prayer upon prayer. Speak to the children of Israel that they should go forward." This Exodus gives a preamble to the text of, "Why are you crying to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." Sort of expansion. I think it's always been a funny sort of thought to me. Is Yah is telling Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Just you know what you're supposed to do. Move.
Yeah.
You've got your orders. Take the hill." It says next, the messenger or the angel of God who was going ahead of the camp of Israel moved away and went behind them. And the column of cloud moved away from in front of them and stood behind them, stationed itself between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was cloud and darkness here, but light by the night there, so that one did not come near the other all night. So it's not until after Mount Sinai that Yah tells Israel that my messenger will guard them. But this, it also says the messenger. Is this the messenger of Elohim and my messenger that's sent after Sinai? That's a kind of a question for pondering. This is the text talking about after Sinai, I'm sending my messenger. Won't we dwell on this much? But verse 23 says, "My messenger shall go before you and shall bring you to the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and shall cut them off." So it's his messenger, or his sent one, if in that sense, his angel. And the famous song here, Yah's my strength and song, and become my salvation. This is also the same phrase where you get, the song Yahweh Ish Milchama is he's a man of battle, and Yahweh Shemo, the song says, Yahweh is his name, and that's where the text shows it there in our text. But he comes as it says, "Become my deliverance" in the text. You see the top red box. It's the word La Yeshua. So as Yeshua, or as salvation. when you're looking at a Torah scroll, this is listed separately out as if it's poetry, the song. The English is below. The Hebrew is on top with English with a transliteration to the left there. And the text says, Az Yasir for 51, and they will sing. Instead of Asar, then they sang. So this is indicating it's an incomplete action or future tense. So since, commentators talk about the second song of Moses in Deuteronomy 31, it's referred to in Hikalut, Revelation chapter 15, but because the tense here, where it says they will sing, instead of they sang, perhaps this is the song they'll be talking about, a song of victory that is being sung here by the women as well as the children of Israel. They will sing. So the Greek text has they were singing in the Greek text of Revelation, Hikalut. Peshitta text says, and they were praising the praise song of Moses. So also an active sort of thing. Then we come to Mara becomes sweet. So I think it's a very interesting analogy here. We have bitter water become sweet with a tree or a piece of wood, as the Complete Jewish Bible says, a certain piece of wood becomes sweet. And the sweetness is, I think, connected to, if you listen to intently to the voice of Yah and observe his mitzvot, I'll not inflict you with any of the diseases of the Egyptians. So listening to intently the voice is follows from the Mara becoming sweet. Now, you know from other readings that waters in Revelation is indicative of people groups and groups of people. Tree brings to mind Torah, the trees on the end of a Torah scroll, the Etzchaim, the truth, the branch, Yeshua, of course, and the stake or the cross. The number 12 in the text, of course, the Talmudim, 12 baskets. The meaning of Lamed is to learn and to teach. 12 times 12,000 equals 444,000, and the 12 gates of New Jerusalem. And the number 70, of course, is a number of the nations, 70 nations, the 70 elders of the Sanhedrin, 70 years in the exile, and Daniel's 70 weeks. And of course, the 70 in terms of the larger group of that were going out in Luke chapter 10. So all these things kind of come together to see Yeshua. You look at this as saying that Yeshua is the one who is causing the bitterness of the peoples to become unbitter, to become sweet. And this is the reference. Another reference here is where this text is the first reference to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Rofecha, your healer. And so that is one of the attribute of Yah is to be your healer. But in the same idea of healing the bitterness of the people, Yeshua's tree brings the bitterness of the people become sweet. If you're listening to what he says and following his mitzvot.
Have you ever heard of the Joshua tree?
I've heard of Joshua. It's a town also.
It is.
Say again. I didn't hear you.
It's where 29 Stumps is.
29 Palms is that. Joshua Tree, California.
Maybe not the same thing. I listened to quite a few survivalist things. And a lot of desert ones talk about what they call, it's actually a bush, but they call it a Joshua tree in a lot of the deserts in the U.S. And you could cut a branch off of that, stick it in your water, and it makes the brackish water
Oh.
drinkable and not harmful. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, look at it. It's interesting.
That's cool.
And that's what this story reminds me of.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you go back and if it's Joshua tree, you could say, well, Yeshua is a, derivative of Yehoshua. So it'd be the same idea there. Yah provide for the needs of the exiles. Manhu, what is it? And this is the gathering. Some at verse 17, the people of Israel did this. Some gathered more, some less. But when they put it in an omer measure, whoever had gathered much had no excess, and whoever gathered little had no shortage. No less, each person had gathered according to his appetite. So what that, again, it's sort of like the providing for the needs of the people. This kind of reminds me of distribution of the loaves and fishes, because it's people were fed, even if they had little, they were fed. I mean, it was a small amount. Whoever gathered little had no shortage. Each had gathered according to his own appetite. So everyone was fed and full, no matter how much they gathered. And of course, Yeshua tells us he is the bread of heaven. This from the Good News of Messiah translation. Verse 33, because the bread of the Almighty is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. They said therefore to him, and I evermore give us this bread. Yeshua said to them, I am the bread of life. Who comes to me, no, shall not have hungered, and the one holding faithful to me, no, he will never thirst. And Cece mentioned earlier, emunah, this is the first reading of that phrase, emunah, or faithfulness. And the first use of faithfulness here is translated as steady or steadfast, and refers to Moses' arms being held up by Aaron and Hur. And so what is it? It's not piety that's being discussed here. It's being steady, reliable, doing what you're supposed to do and continuing to do it. But he couldn't do it. Even at first using faithfulness, he couldn't do alone, right? He had to have the help of Aaron and Hur to fulfill what Yah wanted him to do. So even Moses couldn't do it on his own.
But Yah provided him the ability to do it through those other two.
Correct. So the word appears in the phrase, and his hands were steady or steadfast, and speaking about Moses' arms. The first use often gives us a perspective of the central meaning of that word, and that's what this word means. Emunah, faith or faithfulness. It describes Moses' actions, holding up his arms, held by Aaron and Hur. Let's see. Yeah, so Moses' arms were heavy, but they did it giving victory over Amalek. Think of faith and faithfulness. Do you think of it as its first use as steady or steadfast? Not typically. I think we should probably think of it that way. When you think of faithfulness or being faithful, do you think of do it on your own, or even that Moshe could not? So we've been given friends and family to help with that as well.
Just faithfulness that it's going to be done.
Yeah. All right. So does anything bother you about this reading? Anything that you didn't stick well, so to speak?
Yeah, a couple things.
Go ahead.
How English versions render when they first come out of Egypt, English versions render as to say God didn't lead them out by the highway because they might change their minds and want to go back. That is, in my opinion, suggesting Adonai doesn't know. Well, they might want to. They might want to they might see all this depth and want to turn back. So I'm not leading that way. That suggests Adonai doesn't know what they're going to do, or he doesn't have firsthand knowledge of what's about to happen. I think it should have stated, it should be written out. I didn't study this out or look it up to see what the Hebrew says, but I think it would solidify it better for me if it had said something like, I did not lead them because he knew that when they saw this, they would want to go back. But instead, the English versions kind of say he thinks they might want to go back.
Well, it turns out they want to go back anyway. If they go,
right.
if they go the
It turns out several times, right? And then I asked this several weeks ago. Where did Pharaoh get all the horses to pull 600 chariots? Because just right before this, all the livestock was killed. Pestilence, plagues.
was it only the firstborn of the livestock then?
What's that?
Was it only the firstborn of the livestock?
No, it's more than that. Remember, pestilence killed all the livestock, and then hail came and killed livestock that was out in the field.
Maybe all his was sheltered.
Yeah. It's possible. That is one of the explanations I read. Is the Bible says that it killed all the livestock that was in the field, but not all the livestock that was in barns or wherever. But 600, all the livestock was killed. Where did you get 600 horses to pull the chariots? Anyway.
Is there anyone with you we can relate to any of the readings? There's not really. It's more. It's not really a vignette in that sense, except we go to the Haftorah we have several players there, Deborah and Yael. Maybe you can relate to Sisera. What are these readings telling us about Elohim or about Yeshua?
Have faith. It's going to be done.
Yeah, even if Israel wants to turn back, he's going to make a way for those, the right people to get through.
Yeah.
So there's only one mitzvah in the text, but I think there's many more things we're being told to do. But I'd agree with your statement about faithfulness is what we're being called to, and to in terms of going back to World War II poster, the UK, keep calm and carry on. It's that same idea of being steady and steadfast in the face of adversity.
Stop trying to turn back every time it gets hard.
Even the blitz that the Brits were under, the idea of keeping steady and keep producing, keep fighting because you're going to win.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on a summary you could say? Summary of the text? Headline: Israel leaves Egypt. Leave the house of bondage. All right, let's pray. Oh, we thank you for allowing us the freedom to midrash on your word. We thank you for the blessings you've given us. We ask you to help us keep hold of emunah and be faithful to you. In Yeshua's name we ask this. Amen.